Good morning everyone and welcome to the latest edition of On The Whistle, where we have another Sunderland win to talk about. Sunderland beating West Brom 1-0 at the Hawthorns on Saturday. Now, as ever, myself and James from the press box reacted to the game straight away after the final whistle, so you can go back and watch that on our channel. This morning I'm just going to chat a little bit through some of my thoughts on the game the next day, and also as ever answer all your questions and comments on both the game and all things Sunderland moving forward. So I think the first thing to say about the game and the win from a Sunderland perspective is that defensively some real standout performances. I think that speaking to Labrise after the game, he was quite clear that he wants to see Sunderland be better on the ball, to control the game better, to be more of a threat going forward. But also at this stage of the season, the main thing really is about the mindset of the team and also, of course, the results rather than necessarily the performance. And I think that especially coming off the back of the last away game, which was the Coventry City defeat before the international break, I thought the application and the defensive endeavour of the players was really top draw. I thought Luke O'Nien and Chris Mepham had really superb games at the heart of defence. They made so many blocks, put their body on the line, defended so many set plays. And I think ultimately, the fact of the matter is that despite having the vast majority of the ball and despite having 20-odd shots, West Brom didn't create too many real clear-cut chances. Now, for sure, Sunderland had luck in the game. There's absolutely no two ways about that. So the goalkeeper, I think, makes an error. I think he should save Drake Hume's free kick, although Hume does put it in a really good area. West Brom also did miss two big chances in both halves. Jason Malumbi missing that front post header from 4 or 5 yards out. Daryl DK later on in the game missing also from 4 or 5 yards with a headed chance. So Sunderland were definitely a little bit fortunate. There's a lot of improvement to be done. I was a little bit frustrated watching them in the first half. I felt like they were trying to be too direct too quickly. I could understand what they were trying to do. West Brom, they don't have the quickest defence, and you could see that they were pushing up to try and dominate the ball to get up the pitch. And there was an opportunity there to spring Isidore in behind, but Sunderland just felt too direct, too panicked. And it definitely wasn't their best performance. So there's a lot of we don't want to go overboard because there's clearly a lot that Sunderland can improve. But I think that, you could tell from the reception of the away fans at the end of the game that they were really pleased with the endeavour that their team had shown, the defensive discipline. And as I say, there was defensively some real standout performances. It does just feel to me that although I'd like to see the team play better in certain phases, I feel like with the 2 clean sheets in the last couple of weeks and the sort of way Sunderland put their bodies on the line yesterday, I do feel like maybe internally there's been a little bit of a reset after that Coventry defeat. My big hope is that the kind of deflation and disappointment, if you like, of probably missing out on the top 2, then maybe that the dressing room and the club have been able to get over that a little bit, and we're seeing them really reset and really refocus on their goals now, which is get to the promotion places in the best possible position. And so hopefully now we can see someone start to build up a real head of steam between now and the end of the season. So really important win, even if we acknowledge that Sunderland definitely had a bit of luck in the game. I think that we all know what a good manager Tony Mowbray is, and I think you can see already the way he's been able to put his stamp on this West Brom side. I thought that it's not fully a Tony Mowbray team, but they're almost like a little Tony Mowbray team. You can see the way they're able to control possession. They make it really hard for you to get the ball and to play for large phases of the game. So a really important win, and hopefully one that shows that Sunderland are kind of moving forward from that kind of sticky patch around the Coventry game. Obviously, the big disappointment really was nothing to do with the game itself. It was Romain Mundle's injury. Romain Mundle brought off around half an hour into the game shortly before Sunderland scored. We don't have an update on that in terms of the severity of it. Régis Brice will do his pre-Norwich press conference tomorrow, so there'll be an update after that. But it is the same hamstring that he suffered, that he injured earlier in the season. We don't know if it's the same severity of injury, which obviously would be a massive blow. But that's the big concern yesterday. So I'll be one to watch it in the coming days. But that's certainly the biggest kind of setback or the biggest disappointment, if you like, from the game. So let's have a look at some of your questions, and I'm going to start. I'm pretty sure I have a question on those that substitution decision. So obviously the natural replacement, if you like, would have been Tommy Watson in terms of being an out-and-out left winger, but instead Labrise turned to Miende. And then later in the game, which albeit was more of a time-wasting sub than a tactical sub, very much later in the game, he actually brought Milan Alexic on rather than Tommy Watson. So I've had a few questions on this. So Ross says, does RLB's refusal to give Tommy Watson any minutes today tell its own story? Ian says, snubbing Watson both times, do you think there's anything to read into this, or was it purely tactical? Davey says, after the week Watson has, I think it was sensible not to use him today, but if Mundell is out for a while, I think we'll see Watson soon. So yeah, it's obviously a big talking point coming out of the game. I asked Labrise after the game whether, Watson would have come on had we not learnt this week that he was going to join Brighton, whether the two things were related. And he said that he felt that it was more about how unfortunate Eliza Mienda has been in terms of not being in the starting 11 because of the quality of his performances. And he said it was an obvious decision to go with Mienda, even if it's not his strongest position. He feels that the experience he's gained over the course of the season, the added versatility he has now, that he was kind of the next in line. In my opinion, I think the two are definitely related in terms of, I think the fact that Mienda is so sort of connected is the word that Labrise would use to the club, that he's so driven, so obviously motivated. I think is part of the reason why he moved ahead of Watson. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But having said that, I think that Mienda was excellent in his performance. Every time he got the ball, I thought he made something happen. Didn't see a lot of the ball because of the game state and the fact that West Brom were dominating possession, but he always made something happen, whether it was getting past the plate, create a chance, winning the free kick, as of course he did for Hume's winner. I thought it was a really, really strong performance, and I think that it's one that really establishes himself as the next in line. And if, as seems very likely, Mundell isn't playing on Tuesday, I don't think there's any doubt that Mienda will start, and I think he deserves that opportunity. Now, throwing it forward, I don't think we should read into this that Watson doesn't have a part to play between now and the end of the season. I think it's been a quite intense week for him. He's obviously been the centre of all the headlines, all the stories. I think that when the dust settles a little bit in the weeks ahead, I think that Labrise might be more minded to use him, albeit it looks like it's probably going to be as an impact sub rather than the starter. I think that realistically, I don't think Sunderland can afford to go at the end of the season not using Watson, especially if Mundell does have an injury that's going to keep him out for a while. He's the most obvious direct replacement. Mienda did a really good job yesterday. We know Lafay can play out there. We know Alexic can play out there. But in terms of the way Sunderland set up, the familiarity of their system, the way they like to play, Watson is the obvious next replacement. And I think that Sunderland realistically are going to have to use him. One of the reasons why Sunderland didn't sell Watson on deadline day was because they couldn't get a replacement, and they felt that Watson was in a really good headspace, even if he did, was open to the idea of moving Brighton. They didn't have any concerns over his professionalism and his readiness to contribute. So I think having made that decision, I think they have to stick to that, and Watson is going to have to be used. Are players like Mienda going to be further ahead of him because of the fact that they're obviously connected to the long term of the club? I think that's obvious. But I think that, I think realistically, if Mundell is out for a while, we're going to have to see Watson. If Labrise prefers to use him as a substitute, then I think that's more than fair. But I don't think it's realistic for him to be kind of snubbed, if you like, between now and the end of the season. I think Sunderland have made that decision. I think they will have to give him an opportunity at some point. And of course, it's up to Watson. It's up to the level of performance he brings. And we'll see, where his kind of headspace is. But I still think he's going to be an important player, particularly in the light of that Mundell injury. We don't know how severe it's going to be yet, but if it's the same as hamstring, there's obviously a chance it's going to be a while. So let's have a look at some of the other comments. Some of them. Davey says, even in a brief cameo, Lafay's quality shone like a beacon. Yeah, that first touch from Pastor is the week Isidore, which I think it was his first touch in a competitive game for about 2 months, just showed how good he is. Davey also says, credit to Brown, who brings calmness and experience. I'd be tempted to leave him in at fullback. Yeah, I thought he took him a little while to sort of get a grip with the task. I thought Mighty Johnston was really lively early on, caused him a lot of problems. But I thought Brown got a grip with it. And I thought the second half as well, before he was brought off, I thought he was really, really good. Used all of his experience, made good decisions on the ball, took time out of the game when he needed to. I think I really like having that added experience on the pitch. And while we all know that, when everyone's fit and all things being equal, it's going to be Hume and Sirkin as the fullbacks. I think for me, I agree with Davey. I think that I'd be tempted to give Brown a bit longer because I think we're developing another really useful option for the squad here. And I think that's something I would continue with for a little while. Chris said, I think all players deserve a lot of credit for bouncing back with 2 wins after the Coventry shambles. The performances might not be back yet, but they're fighting. Completely agree with that. We all want to see Sunderland be more fluid, more dangerous going forward. If they're going to win games regularly, they're going to have a lot more shots and create a lot more chances than this. But I agree with you. I think you can see that the spirit is very much there and there's been a refocus. He says, thoughts on the Mienda inverted commas dive? It's soft, but clearly a foul and penalty in my opinion. Yeah, listen, Chris, there's no way to dive. I think that's a really, really, really poor decision. We can debate whether there was enough contact for a penalty. In my opinion, it's either, whichever way you see it, it's 2 players tussling for the ball. They've both ended up on the floor. I don't for a second see how it's a dive. I thought that was a real poor decision. And I thought it was another example of what Meander did all game. He got past his player. He opened up space for Sunderland. He earned free kicks. I thought he produced a really, really good performance. Ian here says, also, while not great attacking wise, defensively and game management great. In my opinion, playoffs could look similar. A good sign to get with the win how we did. Yeah, I agree with that, Ian, and that was certainly the point that Brice made after the game, was that, you know, there's certainly a lot of things he wants to see improvements on, but it's a game that potentially earlier in the season they might have dropped points. Although West Brom did miss a couple of big chances, and we have to acknowledge that Sunderland got lucky in those moments, I don't really remember West Brom having a meaningful shot in the last sort of 10-15 minutes of the game. Patterson made one save high, it was left from a header. After that, Sunderland managed the game really, really well. Made good decisions on the ball. Leo Yelder came on, had an impact, defended their box really well. So I think that's a big positive. Definitely some concerns about the general sort of performance level in terms of the attack and play. But I think that the spirit they showed and the defensive resilience and the game management towards the end of the game is something we can take a lot of positives from looking ahead to what seems very likely to be a playoff campaign. A couple of you asked about this, which I also asked the manager about after. So Tommy says, did RLB discuss the change in midfield? Why did Jobe sit in possession and not Dan yesterday? And Michael also says, very experienced performance in a tricky fixture that I suspect earlier in the season we do drop points in and momentum keeps ticking along. I noticed that Jobe has been playing in the slightly deeper of the midfield three. Any insights into this from Reggie? Yeah, so I asked the Brice about that. Bellingham obviously played very much as his deepest line midfielder. Dan Neil slightly further ahead. Labrie said there was two reasons for it. One is that he feels that both players have had a really, really sort of draining season, a huge workload. We all know how much minutes they've played. And he just thinks it's a way to freshen things up for them moving into the last bit of the season, give them a different challenge. As I say, just add a little bit of freshness. And the second of it was he said he basically just wants to look at it more. I think you might remember that when Daniel was suspended, Jobe played as the deepest line midfielder against Portsmouth earlier in the season, and he was excellent in that game. I think Brice just feels that he can trust those players, basically whatever position he puts them in, and he just wants to have a look at a few new options ahead of the playoffs. I think he feels he can do that certainly with those players without really damaging the structure of the team, and it's not a particularly big risk to do that. And I think that's really sensible. I think we might see little bits and bobs of that more between now and the end of the season, just making small tweaks just to see if there's some new options that can be had ahead of the playoffs. I think that's the luxury of the position that someone have got themselves in, where they're so far ahead of teams like Middlesbrough, Coventry, Bristol City, West Brom, where every game now for them is going to be a cup final. Clearly every game's important for Sunderland, but they do have that little bit more scope to rotate a little bit and make some maybe little tweaks. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into that decision. Tom says the most encouraging thing from today was the resolve to keep a clean sheet. The performance by the whole squad who played today deserves credit for that, especially combating Mowbray when he threw on attacker after attacker. Yeah, definitely, that's the huge positive. Dan says, how do you explain that Hume is playing the best football of his career while out of position and carrying an injury? He's listening, as Labrie said after the game, Trey Hume's a warrior. I think the big thing about Trey Hume now is, listen, he's been brilliant pretty much since he came into the team. Very, very rare for him to have a bad game. That's something we've talked a lot about on the Raw podcast. I think the thing about Hume now is you can see he's a real leader in this team, both vocally and by example. I think his stature has grown so much this season. He feels like he's a real leader in this group despite his young age. I think you can feel the confidence he's got from his experience and the level he's been playing at for a long time. I can't really speak highly enough of Trey Hume, to be honest. I think he's emerged as one of the absolute first names on this team sheet, and the more I see him, the more I think we're looking at, regardless of what happens with Sunderland, hopefully they're a Premier League team next season, but I think we're looking at a future Premier League player because his attitude, his ability, but also his clear appetite to improve, I think it's outstanding. So yeah, I think it's absolutely right that we give Trey Hume plenty of praise. Now, a couple of you under our instant reaction video on YouTube left a comment asking if we think there'll be some more rotation moving forward because of the situation of the season. I think there will be. I think ideally what you want to do is you want to get a situation where the last couple of games you're really focusing on your best team and trying to build some momentum for those playoff games. But I definitely think with the schedule that's coming up, going to Norwich on Tuesday night, obviously the Easter weekend where you play twice in 4 days, I definitely think there'll be little bits of rotation. I don't think Regis is going to at any point want to make sweeping changes because I think you can feel, especially with the last two games and the way he's talking, he really wants to finish the season on a high. He really wants to build some momentum again with the core of his team. But I think realistically, with the squad being so stretched, I think you will definitely see little pockets of rotation to try and protect the players who've played a lot of minutes. And hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll see players like Dan Ballard, Dennis Serkin coming back to fitness and dropping back into the squad. Now, obviously, it's going to be really important to get them some minutes while not rushing them too much, so they're ready to play a part in the playoffs if they are. So I definitely think we'll see some rotation, but I don't think we should expect 5 or 6 changes from game to game, because I think it's clear that Regis wants to try and keep this momentum that's gradually starting to build again. So there we go. Thanks very much for all your questions and comments. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I've been able to give you a little bit of insight into some bits and bobs. As I say, Labrie will have his pre-Norwich press conference tomorrow, so keep your eyes peeled on the Sunderland Echo website, because we'll have all the latest on Romain Mundle's injury and all the latest looking ahead to the game as well. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, and thanks for all your questions.